The aroma of freshly brewed coffee, rich and dark, was our constant morning companion, no matter where Voyager, our trusty camper van, happened to be parked. This particular morning, it mingled with the crisp scent of pine and damp earth. We'd found a quiet little pull-off beside a lake in Maine, the water a sheet of hammered silver under an overcast autumn sky. The trees ringing the shore were a riot of crimson and gold, a painter's ecstatic splash against the gray. Mike, my husband of 32 years, sighed contentedly, cradling his mug. "Another day, another glorious view, Karen," he murmured, his gaze fixed on a lone loon drifting across the water. "Hard to believe this is our life sometimes." I smiled, taking a sip of my own coffee. "It is pretty spectacular, isn't it? And speaking of our life, you know what today is, right?" Mike turned, a playful frown replacing his serene expression. "Oh no. Don't tell me. It's not budget day." He said the words as if they tasted like week-old socks. I chuckled. "Afraid so, my love. First of the month. Time to face the music, or rather, the receipts." It had become a bit of a ritual, this monthly financial reckoning. Not always the most thrilling part of van life, but absolutely essential to keeping this dream of ours rolling smoothly down the highway. We'd learned early on that freedom on the road wasn't entirely free, it required a different kind of currency, awareness, planning, and a healthy respect for spreadsheets. "Can't we just estimate?" he wheedled, though he knew the answer. "Say, a bit more than last month, but less than we'd spend on a mortgage." "Nice try," I said, already reaching for the battered accordion file where our month's worth of paper trails resided. "But you know the drill. Precision, my dear, is key. Besides," I added, tapping the file, "a lot of folks watching our little adventures online have been asking. They're curious about what it really costs to live this life after 50, to trade the house and the 9-to-5 for, well, for this." I gestured out the window at the breathtaking, albeit slightly moody, landscape. Mike nodded, his pragmatic side kicking in. He was always supportive, even if he feigned reluctance at the number crunching. "You're right, of course. Transparency is good. And honestly, I'm always a little curious myself to see where it all went. Sometimes it feels like we just waft along on good intentions and scenic byways." "If only," I laughed. "Our good intentions often have price tags attached. Small ones, usually, but they add up." I pulled out my laptop, the screen flickering to life with the familiar grid of our budget template. "So, shall we dive in? Or do you need another coffee to fortify yourself for the fiscal exploration?" "Another coffee sounds like an excellent strategic move," he declared, already reaching for the kettle. "And maybe one of those blueberry scones we picked up at that farm stand yesterday. For brainpower, you understand." It always started like this, a gentle easing into the task. We knew it wasn't just about numbers, it was a review of our month, our choices, our experiences. Each receipt, each line item, told a tiny story. The fuel bill spoke of miles traveled, of new states crossed. The grocery receipts painted a picture of meals shared, of local produce discovered. Even the occasional repair bill was a testament to Voyager's hard work and our commitment to keeping him in top shape. This wasn't just an accounting exercise, it was a chronicle of our journey, written in dollars and cents. And for us, sharing this part of the story, the unglamorous but vital underpinnings of our adventure, felt just as important as sharing the mountaintop views. It was about showing that a life of freedom and travel after 50 wasn't just a whimsical fantasy, but an achievable reality, grounded in practical decisions and, yes, even a monthly budget. With fresh coffees steaming beside us and the scone crumbs cleared away, mostly by Mike, the real work began. The first challenge, as always, was the Great Receipt Roundup. Despite my best efforts to be organized, there were always a few strays. Mike was surprisingly good at this part, patting down his pockets with the focused intensity of a customs officer. "Aha," he'd exclaim, brandishing a crumpled slip of paper. "Fuel from that tiny station in upstate New York, remember? The one with the chatty owner who told us about the secret waterfall." Got it, I'd reply, making a note. And that waterfall was worth every penny of that tank of diesel. We had a system, refined over 3 years on the road. Most of our regular bills, like insurance and phone plans, were automated, their digital trails easy to follow. Groceries were usually paid for with a specific card, simplifying that category. But it was the cash expenses, the farmer's market splurges, the odd campsite fee paid in an honesty box, the occasional laundromat visit, that required more detective work. I spread the contents of the accordion file across the small dinette table, a colorful mosaic of thermal paper and handwritten notes. Okay, let's categorize, I announced, opening my budgeting app on the laptop. We used a combination of a robust app that synced with our bank accounts and a simple spreadsheet where I liked to manually input and review everything. It felt more tangible that way, more connected to the flow of our resources. Remember that month in Colorado? Mike mused, sorting a pile of grocery receipts. We went a little crazy on artisanal cheeses and local craft beers. The grocery bill looked like we were stocking a gourmet deli. I winced, then laughed. Lesson learned. Everything in moderation, even local delicacies. Though, that smoked Gouda with green chilies was divine, we'd had a frank discussion after that particular budget review, agreeing to allocate a specific treats fund so we wouldn't feel deprived but also wouldn't inadvertently blow the whole food budget on fancy snacks. It was one of those small adjustments, those course corrections, that made long-term van life sustainable. One of the interesting discoveries this month was how low our entertainment expenses were. Look at this, Mike, I said, pointing to the screen. We saw so much, did so much, but a lot of it was free or very low cost. All those hikes in national forests, the evenings spent stargazing, the impromptu music sessions with fellow travelers at that quirky desert campground. That's the beauty of it, isn't it? He replied. Our entertainment is often just living. Being out in nature, exploring small towns. It's not like back home where a weekend out could easily cost a few $100s between dinner, a movie, and parking. He unearthed a receipt for a replacement headlamp for Voyager. Ah, maintenance, he sighed. The gift that keeps on giving. Or taking, I corrected gently. But Voyager takes good care of us. We need to return the favor. And we do have that contingency fund, remember? So, it doesn't come as a nasty shock. This was another key lesson, always have a robust emergency fund for van repairs. They weren't frequent, but when they happened, they could be significant. Ignoring that reality was a recipe for stress and potential disaster. We'd met a few unfortunate souls who'd had to cut their trips short because of an unexpected major repair they couldn't cover. The process wasn't always smooth. Sometimes the app would miscategorize something, leading to a minor investigation. Why does it say we spent $80 at a pet store? I asked, puzzled. We loved animals, but we didn't have any pets on board. Mike peered over my shoulder. Oh. That was the big bag of birdseed we bought for that wildlife refuge volunteer project, remember? And some heavy-duty cleaning supplies that happened to be at the same farm supply store. Right. See? Every expense tells a story. The budget wasn't just a list of numbers, it was a map of our month's activities, our priorities, even our occasional forgetfulness. It was a mirror reflecting our life back at us, and most of the time, we liked what we saw. It showed a life lived intentionally, with resources directed towards experiences and necessities, rather than accumulation. Navigating the labyrinth of our monthly spending always felt like a mini-adventure in itself. My role was usually that of chief navigator, armed with my laptop and a determined glint in my eye. Mike was the indispensable co-pilot, a master receipt finder and the voice of reason when I got too bogged down in the minutiae. Does it really matter if that $5 coffee was groceries or discretionary treat? He'd sometimes ask, and usually, he was right. The bigger picture was what counted. My system, honed over countless months, involved several passes. First, a broad sweep, inputting all the obvious, easily categorized items: fuel, insurance payments, phone bills. Then came the more detailed work, sifting through grocery receipts to separate food from, say, a new dish soap or a magazine. This month, there was a charge for a new water filter for our Berkey, a crucial piece of kit. That went under van household/supplies. You know, Mike commented, watching me drag a campground fee into the accommodation column on the spreadsheet. I was thinking about how much we used to spend on just existing back in the house. Property taxes alone were more than our entire van life budget for some months. That's the big aha moment for most people who consider this lifestyle, isn't it? I replied, nodding. The colossal reduction in fixed overheads. No mortgage or rent, no hefty utility bills for heating and cooling a large space, no council tax. It's a game changer. Of course, we had new expenses. Diesel was a significant one, and propane for cooking in our little heater. And then there was the ever-present van maintenance category, our contingency for Voyager's well-being. We had a good rhythm. I'd call out amounts and categories, and Mike would often recall the specific circumstances. $22.50 for laundry in Bar Harbor. Yep, that was the big load after we got caught in that unexpected downpour during the coastal hike. Everything was muddy. And worth it for that view from the cliffs, I added. We rarely regretted an expense if it was tied to a good experience or a genuine need. Our philosophy had shifted so dramatically from our old life. Then, so much spending felt obligatory, almost unconscious: the daily commute, the lunches bought in a hurry, the endless little purchases to keep a large household running or to keep up with societal expectations. Now, every expenditure felt more deliberate. One crucial tool in our financial arsenal was a set of budgeting envelopes we'd used in the very beginning, a bit old-fashioned, perhaps, but incredibly effective for visualizing where the cash was going. We'd since transitioned to mostly digital, but the principle remained: allocate funds, track spending, and adjust. We also used a fantastic app that helped us find free or low-cost campsites, which made a huge difference to our accommodation line item. Sometimes we'd splurge on a proper campground with full hookups and laundry if we needed a reset day, but often we were perfectly happy boondocking in a beautiful, secluded spot. The key, I think, Mike said thoughtfully, as I wrestled with a particularly cryptic bank statement entry, is that we're a team in this. It's not just Karen's budget, it's our financial plan, our shared responsibility. We both know what's coming in, what's going out, and what our goals are. He was absolutely right. That collaborative approach was vital. In our previous life, we'd had largely separate financial worlds, merging things for big expenses but not really having these detailed, regular conversations. Van life, in its glorious, confined intimacy, had changed that for the better. We were partners in every sense, including managing the shillings and pence that kept Voyager, and our dreams, on the road. This monthly ritual, far from being a chore, had actually become a point of connection, a time to reassess and reaffirm our shared path. It was a practical manifestation of our commitment to living intentionally. As I neared the end of the inputting phase, a sense of anticipation always started to build. It was like waiting for the results of a friendly, personal audit. How did we do this month? Were there any surprises? Were we still on track to afford that little side trip to Nova Scotia we were dreaming about for next summer? The numbers held the answers. The moment of truth had arrived. All the receipts were entered, the bank statements reconciled, the app's categories double-checked against my master spreadsheet. I took a deep breath, a theatrical gesture that always made Mike chuckle. "Drumroll, please," I said, turning the laptop screen so he could see it better. The little dinette in Voyager suddenly felt like mission control, and we were about to get the final mission report. "All right, Commander Karen," Mike grinned, leaning forward. "Let's see the damage. Or hopefully, the distinct lack thereof." I started with the biggest hitters, the ones that always formed the bedrock of our monthly spend. Okay, first up, fuel. This past month, covering our journey from the Adirondacks, across Vermont and New Hampshire, and up into Maine, we spent $672 on diesel. Mike whistled softly. That's a fair chunk, but we did cover a lot of beautiful miles. And diesel prices have been a bit up and down lately, it was true. Fuel was our single largest variable expense, directly tied to how much exploring we did. Some months, if we stayed put in one region, it could be half that. Other months, if we were making a big cross-country push, it could be more. Next, groceries, I continued. This includes all our food, cooking supplies, coffee, the essentials for keeping us fed and happy. Total for the month, $485. Not bad at all for two people eating 3 meals a day, plus snacks, Mike commented. Especially considering we prioritize fresh ingredients and good quality. Cooking in the van has saved us a fortune compared to eating out all the time, and frankly, your cooking is better than most restaurants, my dear, I beamed at the compliment. It was true, we rarely ate out, preferring the creativity and economy of our tiny galley kitchen. Accommodation, this covers campsite fees, the occasional night in a Harvest Host spot if we bought something, or any park entry fees that weren't covered by our annual pass. This month, it was surprisingly low, $130, this was largely thanks to our diligent searching for free boondocking spots and leveraging our national park pass. Some months, if we chose more private campgrounds for amenities, this could be higher. Then came the less exciting, but equally important, categories. Van maintenance and repairs. This month was pretty good. We had that new headlamp, an oil change, and we topped up the coolant. Total, $95, we always budgeted more for this, putting aside a few hundred each month into Voyager's dedicated health fund, so this month's actual spend was a relief. The surplus just stayed in the fund for future needs. Insurance, I announced. This is a big one, non-negotiable. Vehicle insurance for Voyager, and our health insurance, which is a significant consideration when you're living nomadically, especially after 50. Combined total, $780, this was a fixed cost we'd researched extensively to get the best coverage for our unique lifestyle. It provided immense peace of mind. Connectivity, our lifeline to the world, for work, for keeping in touch with family, and for sharing these adventures with all of you. That's our mobile phone plans and our internet hotspot. Total, $140, reliable internet was crucial, as Mike did some freelance consulting work online, and I managed our travel blog and social media. Propane, for cooking, hot water, and our little Propex heater on chilly nights, $38 this month. Maine in early autumn was definitely starting to require a bit of morning warmth. Laundry, I said, with a slight grimace. The never-ending cycle. $65, Mike patted my hand sympathetically. It's the price of clean socks and smelling respectable. Activities and entertainment. This covers things like museum entries, local tours, a ferry ride we took to a small island, things not covered by nature's free admission. This month, $110, we always tried to balance paid attractions with the abundance of free experiences available. And finally, I said, scrolling to the last major category, miscellaneous and buffer. This is for things that don't quite fit elsewhere, a haircut for Mike, a couple of books, a small gift we sent for a friend's birthday, plus a little bit extra we try to keep for unforeseen small stuff. This month, that came to $155. I paused, then clicked the sum button for the grand total. The number appeared at the bottom of the screen. So, for this past month of van life, traveling through some of the most scenic parts of New England, our total expenditure was $2,770. We both looked at the number. It sat there, glowing quietly on the screen. Mike let out a slow breath. 2,770, he repeated. You know, all things considered, for a month of travel, adventure, and comfortable living, that feels really good. I nodded in agreement. It does. It's not nothing, by any means. But when you compare it to the cost of our old life, the mortgage, the property taxes, 2 car payments, utilities, commuting costs, it's significantly less, and for a quality of life that, for us, is infinitely richer. The number wasn't just a figure, it was an affirmation. An affirmation that this dream, this leap of faith we took, was not only possible but sustainable. It represented freedom, carefully managed. The immediate aftermath of the budget reveal always brought a sense of calm accomplishment, like finishing a challenging but rewarding hike. We sat there for a moment, the two of us, in our cozy little home on wheels, the raw beauty of the Maine wilderness just outside our window, and contemplated that final number, $2,770. Fuel was definitely the big story this month, Mike mused, sipping his now lukewarm coffee. Almost 700. But then, we drove from the western edge of the Adirondacks right up to northern Maine. That's a fair old distance. And those mountain roads, while beautiful, aren't exactly known for their fuel efficiency. True, I conceded. But every one of those miles bought us something incredible. The views from the Kancamagus Highway, that little village in Vermont that felt like stepping back in time, finding this perfect lakeside spot. I wouldn't trade those experiences to save a few gallons of diesel. That was the constant calculation, the balancing act, the cost versus the richness of the experience. And our grocery bill, under $500, he continued, clearly impressed. That's fantastic. We ate like kings. Remember that amazing seafood chowder you made with the fresh clams we bought from that fisherman in Cutler? My stomach rumbled at the memory. That's the advantage of having our kitchen with us wherever we go, I said. We can take advantage of local produce, fresh catches, and we're not reliant on expensive takeaway or restaurant meals. Plus, let's be honest, half the fun is the cooking itself, isn't it? Mike was an enthusiastic, if sometimes messy, sous chef. We then invariably started comparing it, almost as a reflex, to our old life. Our old mortgage payment alone was almost $2,000, Mike recalled, shaking his head. Then add property taxes, probably another $500 a month. And utilities for that big house, easily $300 or $400, especially in winter. Don't forget commuting, I chimed in. 2 cars, fuel, insurance, maintenance, parking. That must have been close to $1,000 a month, just to get to jobs that, well, paid for the house and the commute. A slightly wistful, slightly self-deprecating smile passed between us. We weren't knocking our old life, it had served its purpose. But looking back from this vantage point, the financial treadmill we'd been on seemed almost absurd. So, just those big fixed costs were probably well over $4,000 a month, Mike calculated. And that's before food, before any kind of entertainment, before saving for a holiday. This $2,770, for everything, including constant travel and new experiences, it puts things in perspective. There was a deep sense of gratitude that settled over us. Gratitude for the choices we'd made, for the courage it took to downsize so drastically, and for the simple fact that this lifestyle was working for us, financially and emotionally. It wasn't a shoestring budget by some hardcore Vanlifer standards, perhaps. We prioritized good health insurance, we maintained Voyager meticulously, and we didn't skimp on healthy food. But it was a budget that allowed for richness of experience without extravagance, a budget that felt sustainable and secure. It just feels intentional, I said, trying to put my finger on the core feeling. Every dollar has a purpose, a reason. It's either keeping us safe and comfortable, or it's enabling an adventure. There's very little frittering anymore, Mike nodded, understanding completely. The process of tracking our expenses so closely had made us incredibly mindful of our consumption, in the best possible way. It wasn't about restriction, it was about conscious allocation. This monthly budget ritual, as much as Mike sometimes pretended to dread it, had become a cornerstone of our van life. It wasn't just about counting pennies, it was about cultivating a deep understanding of our financial landscape, which in turn, gave us an incredible sense of freedom and control. It's one of the great paradoxes, isn't it? That discipline, in this case financial discipline, can be the very thing that unlocks liberation. We often talked about how van life is often portrayed as this completely carefree, spontaneous existence. And while there's certainly a huge element of spontaneity and freedom from traditional routines, the idea that it's free or requires no planning is a misconception. To make it sustainable, especially after 50 when you're perhaps not looking to live on ramen noodles and hope, you need a plan. You need to understand your resources. What this really shows, Mike said, leaning back and stretching, is that this lifestyle isn't about being rich in the traditional sense. We don't have a huge investment portfolio generating passive income, not yet anyway. But we've redefined what rich means to us. I knew exactly what he meant. Rich, for us, was waking up to a different stunning view every few days. It was having the time to read books, to hike, to learn new things, to meet fascinating people from all walks of life. It was the richness of experience, the wealth of memories we were accumulating, far more valuable to us now than a bigger house or a fancier car. Our old life had plenty of material comforts, but it was often poor in time, poor in shared, unhurried moments. And the lesson here, I added, is that you don't need to win the lottery to do this. You need to be intentional. You need to be willing to make trade-offs. We traded a lot of square footage for a lot of freedom. We traded a certain kind of societal status for a different kind of personal fulfillment. These weren't sacrifices in a painful sense, they were conscious choices, exchanges that felt overwhelmingly positive. One of the most profound lessons we'd learned was the sheer power of reduced overheads. When your basic cost of living plummets, it opens up so many possibilities. It meant Mike didn't have to take on stressful, full-time consulting projects. He could pick and choose smaller, more interesting gigs that he could do remotely. It meant we weren't constantly worried about the next big bill. That mental space, that freedom from financial anxiety, was priceless. It's also about flexibility, Mike pointed out. If we have a month where Voyager needs a significant repair, like when we had to replace the alternator last year, we can adjust. We might stay in free spots for longer, or cut back on discretionary spending for a bit. Because we know our numbers, we know where we have that wiggle room. That adaptability was crucial. Life on the road, like life anywhere, throws curveballs. Being financially nimble allows you to catch them without getting knocked over. This process also strengthened our partnership. Talking openly about money, about our spending habits, our financial goals, our anxieties, it built a deeper layer of trust and understanding between us. In our previous life, money had sometimes been a source of unspoken tension, as it can be for many couples. Now, it was just another aspect of our shared adventure, another puzzle to solve together. There was no blame, no judgment, just a collaborative effort to make our resources support our shared dream. Ultimately, I concluded, closing the laptop, the numbers now committed to memory and digital record, this budget, this $2,770, represents the cost of living our dream. And honestly, it feels like a bargain. It wasn't just about the money saved compared to our old life, it was about the value received. Every dollar spent felt like an investment in joy, in learning, in connection, in the profound satisfaction of crafting a life that truly resonated with who we had become. With the budget officially done and dusted for another month, a familiar sense of lightness settled in Voyager's cozy interior. The numbers were crunched, the insights gleaned, and now we could look forward. So, Mike began, already shifting gears. Now that we know we're not bankrupt, what's the plan for next month's fiscal adventures? Any big-ticket items on the horizon we need to brace for? I smiled. Well, we know Voyager is due for a new set of tires before winter really sets in. That's going to be a significant outlay, probably the biggest maintenance item for the next few months. We've been saving for it in the Van Health Fund, so it shouldn't be a shock, but it's definitely on the radar. We always try to anticipate these larger, periodic expenses. Surprises are rarely fun when it comes to vehicle upkeep. Good point, he acknowledged. And we were talking about potentially taking that short ferry over to Grand Manan Island while we're in this neck of the woods. That would be an extra cost for ferry tickets and maybe a paid campsite over there. If boondocking is tricky, it was these little potential splurges, these experience-driven choices, that our careful budgeting allowed us to consider without guilt or anxiety. We also knew that as we headed further north and the weather turned colder, our propane usage would likely increase. A small thing, but all these little variables added up. The beauty of our system was its adaptability. We weren't rigidly locked into any specific figure, it was a living budget, responsive to our travels, the seasons, and voyagers' needs. It's important for folks to remember, too, I said, thinking of our viewers, that this is our budget, for our style of travel. Someone else might spend a lot less if they're super frugal, rarely move, and are happy with very basic amenities. Someone else might spend more if they prefer luxury campgrounds every night, eat out frequently, or have a newer, more expensive van with higher insurance. There was no one-size-fits-all cost of van life, it was as individual as the people living it. Mike nodded. Exactly. We're not presenting this as the definitive guide, but more as an honest look at what it costs us, two people in their late 50s, traveling relatively comfortably in a well-maintained older van, prioritizing experiences but also mindful of our resources. The day was progressing. The sun had finally burned through the overcast, and beams of light were now dappling the forest floor around the lake. The loon had been joined by a companion, their mournful, beautiful calls echoing across the water. It was a reminder of why we did this, why we bothered with spreadsheets and receipt chasing. It was all in service of these moments, this freedom. Well, that was another successful State of the Union address for Voyager's finances, Mike said, getting up to stretch. And I have to admit, as much as I tease, I do feel better knowing where we stand. Knowledge is power, even when it comes to ATM slips. I laughed. It is indeed. And now, I believe we've earned a walk by that incredibly scenic, and entirely free, lake. So, we pulled on our jackets and stepped out into the crisp Maine air. As we walked, we talked not of budgets, but of the changing leaves, the clarity of the water, and the sheer, unadulterated joy of being able to call this incredible, ever-changing landscape our backyard. The numbers, for now, could rest. They had done their job, affirming our path and empowering us for the miles ahead. We hoped that sharing this little slice of our reality, the practical side of the dream, might offer a bit of insight, perhaps even a nudge of encouragement, to anyone out there wondering if they too could trade routine for the open road. Because living fully, as we've learned, isn't about how much money you have, but how intentionally you use what you've got. And for us, every mile, every story, every carefully considered dollar, was part of that beautiful equation. Until next time, keep exploring, keep dreaming, and remember that adventure has many forms, even in the lines of a budget spreadsheet.